Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 200th episode of the Ask Abhijit show. Thank you so much for being here. We have crossed the double century, we have touched the double century mark, and it is all thanks to you that I have been able to reach here. It is all of us together. So, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you, everybody who has been watching this show from the first episode onwards. So many people have been part of the journey, and it's a journey that's continuing. We are at a certain stage, and I just want to thank everybody because this is all because of you. If nobody had been watching, if there was no interest, there was no support, then I obviously would not have gone on to cross 100 and now reach 200. So thank you to all of you. I would like to thank some people especially. First of all, I would like to thank RAMALAKSHMI, who always does the timestamps, puts up the timestamps, which helps not just me, it helps everybody who watches this, because those of you who want to watch this later, you will get the timestamps. So thank you so much, Rama Lakshmi. I really appreciate that. I've never met you. But you do this selflessly. It's so kind of you. I really appreciate that. And the people in the past who have done that, like Harshit 2.0, Akash Bullar, and I would like to thank other people also who I may not remember right now. Those of you who ask questions, those of you who participate, thank you so much to all of you. I really appreciate that. I'm really grateful to all of you for bringing this show to where it is today. Okay, so let me see. Let me greet a few of you on the live chat. Who all is there today? I can see Bhai Ayush Verma, Spy, Three Ways S2, Priyanshu Asura, Arkapan Goshal, Pritam Roy, American Breathing Biden Blast, Ninja Feminist Tuberculosis, Karan Nalavad, Veva Patil, Mrinalini, thank you, Ubendran, Bhai, Photo Heer, One Patel, Bhargav, Ayush Verma, Bye, Harshei, Pritam Roy, McLovin, Geopolitical Dubey, thank you, Dhruv Goyal, Netizen, Rahul Dunake, Dungar Singh Chauhan, hello, nice to see you again. Dungar Singh Chauhan has been part of the journey for a very, very long time. So appreciate that. Nitin Kumar, VM, PyTube, Miguel Diaz, Cosmic Gaming 7781, Tushar Kalburgi, Anjali Pramod, Pratham Gupta, Gautami, Karan Nalawat, hello. Uh, so many other people, AK, Ansh Prakash, Ralla Avinash, Priyanshi Sood, who has been here for a long time. Thank you so much. Tanmay Deshpande, Pranay Paul, so many of you on this live stream. Warwick Zale, Anurag Red, ZXX, Ritwik Acharya, and I saw some comments earlier. Telugu Man, Artemis, Badman Beats, who else? Spy, who is following since episode 9. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that. Swastik, Sakshi, the Observer, Komal, and everybody else. So yeah, I'll stop greeting you all there. Sorry to those of you who I did not greet individually, but greetings to all of you. So I'm going to take some questions that you have asked in the comments, maybe 15 of those, and then I will take questions from the live chat, and maybe I will do some video chat if I feel like, if there is time for that, in case some of you want to ask questions on screen. But let's go first with the questions that you have asked in the comments. So okay, a couple of questions by AD Guru Prasad. Views on UK's new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. His party has come to power after a very long time. Does the change in the government in the UK make any difference? Will it make any difference in terms of trade, diplomatic ties, or working on anything else together? Okay, so what are my views on Keir Starmer? First of all, the Labour Party is back in power after a gap of roughly 14 or so years. It went out of power. It lost the last elections. The last time it was in power was in 2010. And ever since then, it's been the Conservatives who have been in power, mostly, if I recall correctly. And Rishi Sunak has lost the election, and Keir Starmer has won in a landslide victory. So yeah, it's a big change apparently for the UK, but does it really make any big difference with the rest of the world? That's what the question is, right? So first of all, what are my views about Keir Starmer? I don't know this guy really well. He's in his early 60s or something. He doesn't have a very well defined political position. In the past, he has been regarded as soft left. He doesn't have any hard stance on international relations. Uh, he's all about the development of the UK and the economic development and equal opportunity and climate change and stuff like that, which is all, well, it's neither here nor there. What's your stance on immigration? What's your stance on the Ukraine war? Of course, he's going to support the US on that and so on. But no clearly defined stand on any major issues. A very anodyne kind of person, a guy who no one hates and no one likes. That's that sort of guy. But somehow he has positioned himself in a place where he now is the new prime minister. So the UK has become kind of a revolving door prime ministership. People come and go. People come and go. That lady Liz Truss was prime minister for 50 days. Rishi Sunak was probably one of the shortest serving prime ministers of the UK in the 20 in the 20 since the 20th century. uh, 1 year and what 200 something days, 300, I don't know, 200 something days, maybe one of the shorter serving prime ministers of the UK. And now we have this guy. So I don't really know what to make of this guy. He doesn't have any clearly defined stand on anything. He doesn't really represent anything big or anything powerful. He's just a guy, I guess. And that's the kind of guy, if you are a superpower, that's the kind of guy you want to have in power in one of your vassal states. And obviously the UK is a vassal of the US. The revolving door prime ministership that the UK has, it kind of is reminiscent of what you have, the situation you have in Japan. In Japan also, apart from one man, Shinzo Abe, the others have just come and gone, come and gone, come and gone. It doesn't really matter who's the prime minister of Japan, because at the end of the day, their policies never change. Their policies are always whatever the US says. And the same goes for the UK. So I don't know if he'll make any significant impact on the fortunes of his nation. Certainly not on the global stage, international stage, geopolitical stage. The UK is not a major geopolitical power by any means. It is an instrument that the US uses for various purposes, and that's the only utility the UK has. The UK is a reasonably poor nation attached to London. That's what it is, and it is the you could say the victim of rampant large scale immigration that no one is doing anything about. And the UK is changing significantly, and it is headed in a certain direction. Well, I would say all the best to them. It's your business, none of mine. uh, Go with it. Go do whatever you want to your country. That's all right with me. So i so that's how I see this guy, Keir Starmer. No real stand on anything. He doesn't have any flag to plant somewhere that this is what I stand for and this is what I'll do. Nope, nothing like that. He's okay. Uh, does this change in government of the UK make any difference in terms of trade, diplomatic, etc.? No, nothing really will change. Some policies internally they will change. I will whatever the conservatives were doing, Labour will try to kind of undo that and go backwards. So 5 years, 10 years, the conservatives are in power. They'll implement certain policies that have some impact domestically, and then the others, the Labour Party comes to power, they'll spend the next 5 years going backwards, I mean, or going in the other direction, and then these guys come back and they'll go. So it's a seesaw kind of thing. There's no real progress in the UK. So the UK is kind of a moribund nation. I don't know what sort of future it has long term. So yeah, that's kind of how I see the UK. I don't see any big change happening in the UK with this guy and his party coming to power. If you look at it, the UK's international relations, it won't change much. It is still very much an extension of the US. The UK will continue to serve whatever purpose the US has for it, and that's how it's going to be. When it comes to India UK ties, I don't see any significant difference. The UK will continue to shelter anti India activists and separatists and Khalistani activists and all that. They'll continue to do that. No big change. On the other hand, they'll continue to pay lip service to having better ties with India, and they'll certainly want Indian investment, and they'll want to have good economic ties with India in certain directions and all that. So that will continue. I don't see any major change in any of those things, whether it is the UK's relationship with the US, with India, with the EU, with Russia, with China, or whatever else. This guy is going to make no difference whatsoever. I'm telling you this. I think he's one day into the prime ministership. Let me say this right now. I usually don't make predictions. I had once made a prediction about Liz Truss that she will achieve nothing. Unfortunately, it came true. And I'm saying this again when it comes to this guy, Keir Starmer. He's going to make no lasting impact whatsoever. He's going to implement no significant new policies, and it's going to be just continuity. He may last longer than his predecessor, Rishi Sunak, perhaps. But just like Rishi Sunak, just like Liz Truss or whoever else, Keir Starmer is going to make no significant lasting impact on his nation or on the world. That's how I see it. Time will tell us whether I'm going to be right or wrong, but that's how I see it. Okay. Adi Shri and Anant Pai ask questions about the SCO summit. Can you tell us why our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, skipped the SCO summit? Why do you think PM Modi sent Dr. S. Jaishankar to the SCO summit in Kazakhstan, Astana, instead of going there himself? Is India sending a message to China that we don't want to take SCO as seriously as BRICS? What is going on? Okay. So yes, the SCO summit happened in Astana, Kazakhstan. And Mr. Modi has made it a point to attend all the previous SCO summits whenever they happened in person. At least 5 of those, if I recall correctly, he has attended. So he usually makes it a point to attend this summit, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And this year, he chose not to go, and he has sent his minister, Dr. Jaishankar, India's foreign affairs minister, to represent him and to represent India at the summit. And the ostensible official reason that's been given is that there is a parliamentary session underway, the first parliamentary session of this new parliament, right after the first parliamentary session after the general election. So it's an important parliamentary session, and that's why the Prime Minister needs to attend that. That's the official reason that's been given. Well, there's nothing significant happening in Parliament right now. There's no big debate or big fight that's happening. Nothing of any significance that would need the Prime Minister to be there. He could very much have, taken a couple of days out of his schedule to attend this very important event. It's certainly a very important event. And recently, the Prime Minister he attended the G7 summit in Italy, and he usually attends all these important multilateral events, but this time he's not gone there. So that's interesting. It is certainly interesting. So what could be the reasons for this? Well, first of all, we have to understand that India became a member, and Prime Minister Modi attended the SCO summits even when India was not yet a full member. India was just an observer, and yet he attended those summits. It's only in 2017 that India became a full member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and Pakistan was also made a member that same year. So what could be the reason for why? I mean, beyond the official reasons, what could be the real reasons is the question for Prime Minister Modi choosing to not attend the summit. Has it something to do with Pakistan? Does it something to do with Russia? Does it have something to do with China, the Central Asian nations? What's the deal? So one thing you could think of is it's about Pakistan, because we want to not have any dealings with Pakistan at any level. And Pakistan is a full member of the SCO, and whoever is the Prime Minister currently, it's one of the Sharif brothers, I believe, who's the Prime Minister right now. For now, he is there, and we don't want to get to run into these individuals. So Mr. Modi will not go there, and he will ask his minister to attend so that he doesn't have to run into the Pakistani guy. That could be one way to look at it, but I don't think that's the case. Even if you attend the summit, you can simply ignore the Pakistani person, the prime minister, you can just ignore the person. You don't have to go and talk with him. So that's not quite the reason. I don't think that's the case. The other possibility you could think of is that there's the Ukraine war going on. The West is obviously it wants to destroy Russia, and the West has been extremely unhappy with India's continuing good relations with Russia. India purchasing tremendous quantities of Russian oil, and India refusing to condemn the Russian special military operation in Ukraine. All of that, and maybe now the pressure has become too much, and now India has had to distance itself from Russia. That's another way you could look at it. But, well, Prime Minister Modi is going to be in Moscow tomorrow. Well, what about that? Yeah, tomorrow or next week. I think 7th, 8th, 9th, something like that. In the next couple of days, he's going to be in Moscow. Well, so then that Russia theory doesn't work at all, because he's actually going for a bilateral summit meeting with Mr. Putin, which is something even more high profile than a multilateral kind of meeting with other nations. So that theory doesn't work. In the India-Russia relationship is very much on track, and India is making it a point to prioritize this relationship, and India treats this relationship with a tremendous amount of importance. So that Russia theory also doesn't work. Then what's the question? Do we have a problem with the Central Asian nations, the Kazakhstans, Tajikistans, all that? Absolutely not. We have excellent relations with them. We would like to have even better relations with these nations. They are critical to our connectivity with Eurasia, within Eurasia, with Europe, etc. Why would we have any problem with those nations? And they also need us. They would like to have better relations with us, so that it can kind of offset the other powerful nations, Russia and China, in the SCO. So what's the deal? I'll tell you what the deal is. The deal is China. The problem is China. India. Okay, so here's the deal. First of all, India has right now there's a very tense standoff happening in the Himalayan region, the disputed boundary between India and Chinese occupied Tibet. If you want, I can put the map on the screen. Where's the map? Here's the map. Come on, map. Here's the map. So we have this extremely long, lengthy border with Chinese occupied Tibet, and that's an undemarcated border because the Chinese have steadfastly refused to demarcate the border, and there have been clashes in the past 3-4 years along the border, multiple clashes, including the Galwan clash, when the first firing happened since the 1980s, and the first time soldiers on both sides died, and so on. And the entire crisis, which is ongoing, is has been created by the Chinese. India is not the aggressor, the Chinese are the aggressors. So the Chinese are trying to push India on the back foot, but it's not working. And so we have this extremely tense situation in the Himalayan heights, the icy, perennially frozen heights, which are the undemarcated border between India and Tibet. So there is that. And so relations between India and China are not good at all. It is entirely China's fault. India does not claim Chinese territory. India has not started any of the aggression. The Chinese are the ones who are the culprits, who are to blame. No matter how they spin the thing, no matter what grandiose language and words about 5 principles of whatever universal peace brotherhood they blabber about, they are the culprits when it comes to this. They are an aggressive hegemonic nation. They seek to bully everybody, and it's not working with India. And if our prime minister were to go and make a show of good relations with Xi Jinping, that would tell the world that everything is okay, and India has kind of backed down and given in to Chinese bullying. So that doesn't work for us. We actually want to distance ourselves from China, not from Russia. Okay. And the Chinese also don't have too many friends in the world. The Russians are unwitting friends, so to say, right now. But that's the thing. So we will not do anything that makes China look good and gives the false impression that everything is fine with China. We will not talk with China. Our prime minister has made it a point that he will not talk with Mr. Xi Jinping. He will not go to any event in which Mr. Xi Jinping is there. He will depute his minion to do that. Right? And the fact also is that the SCO is a China-dominated organization. It's the three major. See, there are two major economic powers in the SCO. One is obviously China, the second largest economy. The second is India, the fifth largest economy, soon to be the third largest economy. And the most powerful military in the SCO is obviously Russia, followed by China and then India. So, but overall, the SCO is a Chinese dominated organization simply because of China's enormous economy. And we don't want to give China, that win that, okay, we got India to come. So that is the thing. I think that India is going to, uh, going forward, give less importance to the SCO. The BRICS is a whole different story. BRICS is not a China dominated organization. Even though China would like to kind of make it happen that way, but it's not working. It's not going to work that way. So BRICS, India will give it due importance, but the SCO, India is going to kind of, perhaps it looks like, distance itself from the SCO. So I think the reason why Prime Minister Modi has chosen to skip the SCO summit is because of China's aggression against India, continuing aggression against India. And we also haven't forgotten that the Chinese leader, Mr. Xi Jinping, chose to not attend the G20 summit in New Delhi when there was no reason for him not to attend. So we're kind of giving it back, even though this summit is in Astana, but it's a Chinese dominated organization. So I think that is the reason. That's how I see it. Do you have any theories? Well, let me know in the comments. Abhijit Chavda Light. Well, that's a new one. Okay, the question is, does Russia have the capability to fight the West all alone? Right, that's a good question. So we're talking about fighting here. So what does it mean when you say fight? Are we talking about a fist fight? We're talking about a military fight? We're talking about an economic fight? Are we talking about a multi-dimensional fight? Are we talking about lawfare, warfare, cyber warfare, whatever warfare? So let's assume it's everything put together. Okay. So what are Russia's capabilities vis-a-vis the West? First of all, Russia's economy is not even in the top 10, okay, worldwide. Russia is an autarky, which means that it won't be affected by sanctions, and it has not been affected by sanctions. Russia's economy has actually grown stronger over time, the past 2.5 or so years, ever since the February 22 special military operation started. So Russia's economy is overall okay. It is way more immune to external shocks and sanctions compared to other nations, but it is a small economy, not even in the top 10 in the world. So economically, Russia cannot really fight the Americans. Okay, when we're talking about the West, we are talking about the United States. The US dominates the West. The US owns the West. The US runs and operates the West. The Russians cannot fight the West economically. They can withstand sanctions. They can fight a good defensive economic campaign against the West. They can't fight an offensive economic campaign against the West. They do not have the means to fight an offensive economic campaign against the West. What about cyber warfare? I think the Russians are really good at cyber warfare. So when it comes to cyber warfare, I think they are on even terms, even keel, even they're on par. The West and Russia. When it comes to other forms of warfare, bio warfare, chemical warfare, I'm pretty sure the Russians are really good at that. Okay. What about space warfare? The Russians have interesting satellites that apparently can maneuver on their own and do stuff. So they're reasonably good at that. But probably the Western satellites and capabilities outmatch those of Russia, especially with the private sector in the US taking off SpaceX and all that. So over that, the West has an advantage. What about conventional warfare? When it comes to conventional military warfare, I think the Russians have a very powerful military, but they do not have the power projection capabilities that the US has. The US has more than 800 extraterritorial military bases worldwide. The Russians don't even have 20, maybe 20 or so. So the Russians are no match when it comes to power projection. Okay, conventional military warfare. Technologically, the Russians are developing all kinds of 21st century weapon systems like drones and loitering munitions and suicide weapons and all that. suicide, robotic loitering drones, all those things. The Russians have good tanks and good soldiers, good infantry, good mechanized divisions, and all of that. But overall, do they have the ability to strike at the heart of Europe if they want to? It's kind of doubtful given the kind of strength NATO has. The Russians have one of the largest air forces in the world. Many of those aircraft could be kind of old aircraft, MiG 31s and Sukhoi 30s and Sukhoi 35s. They have the Sukhoi 57, which is a fifth generation fighter plane, and all that. They are in the process of developing various flying wing aircraft like the Okhotnik drone and other things. They have, so all of that is there. They have excellent cruise missiles, the Russians. They have the probably the only nuclear powered, nuclear fueled cruise missile in the world, which essentially has unlimited range, all of that. But overall, militarily, Russia is a very powerful defensive power. It does not have the offensive capabilities that the US and the West have. Okay, so it's a great defensive power, but it cannot. The American Air Force definitely outmatches the Russian Air Force. The American power projection capabilities completely outmatch those of Russia. Russia is essentially surrounded by the US, whether it is in the east. I mean, if you look at the map, you will see that apart from China, Russia, I mean, see, in the east, you have South Korea and Japan, and this, that kind of encircle Russia. You have Taiwan, you have the Philippines, you have all these pro-US nations that kind of encircle China and Russia. In the west, you have Western Europe that kind of, is a barrier against Russia, and NATO has been creeping eastwards. And Russia has some ability to project power in Syria, etc., but not too much compared to what the US has, and then nothing else apart from that. Russia does have a significant amount of influence in Central Asia, but that's about as far as it goes. So Russia is a powerful defensive power. Can Russia defeat the West all alone? It cannot defeat the West in a conventional war. Russia will lose a conventional war. The US simply has too many assets. The US Air Force itself is enough to, take out the Russian Air Force eventually. So where does Russia have the advantage? Russia has the world's largest nuclear weapons stockpile. It can absolutely annihilate the US and the rest of the world if it chooses to. But that will be a nuclear holocaust, which will destroy the whole world. So the Russians obviously don't want to do that. No one wants to do that because it will mean the destruction of the entire planet, including Russia. So that is the last weapon the Russians have. The Americans know that if they push too far, if push comes to shove, something really bad could happen. So overall, if you look at all of this put together, the Russians are a tremendously powerful defensive power, but they don't have the ability to project power and defeat the West on, let's say, Western soil. But they have the ability to destroy the West if they choose to, which will end up destroying the whole world. So that's where Russia is. It cannot be defeated, but it can't win. Okay, the same person, Abhijit Chabdalite, asks, is the Russia-China-Iran alliance, is it more powerful than the Axis powers in the Second World War? Does this alliance have the potential to beat the West if World War II happens? The World War II is over. I'm guessing you are asking about the next World War, which we hope never happens, World War III. Okay, so what was the Axis alliance in the Second World War? It was Germany, Italy, and Japan, essentially. Essentially, these three powers, and some powers here and there had gone along with them. So when it comes to the Second World War, Italy was not that much of a big power. The real big powers in the Axis were Germany and Japan. Germany was a technological superpower at the time. They had the best aircraft, they had pioneered rocketry, they had pioneered cruise missiles and all that, but they were a landlocked nation, and eventually they got encircled and squeezed and smashed by the Soviets eventually. Japan, a tiny nation, but tremendous technological abilities, and they had the ambition to be a Western nation. So they behaved like the West and did things that the Western nations would do: genocide and occupation and colonialism and all that. So Japan was really powerful. Germany was really powerful. Now, what about Russia, China, Iran? So this is a very different kind of alliance. This time we're talking about Russia. See, Russia has Germany. In the Second World War, we did not have nuclear weapons until the very end, when the first nuclear weapons were developed and two of them were tested on Japanese civilians. Today, a Third World War involves nuclear weapons. It involves a war fighting between nuclear weapons powers. So when it comes to Russia, China, Iran, Russia and China are both nuclear weapons powers. Russia has the largest arsenal. China has a decent arsenal, maybe 300, maybe 500, maybe 1,000 nuclear weapons. We don't quite know how many warheads they have, but they are a decently medium-sized nuclear weapons power. The Chinese, Iran may perhaps be a nuclear weapons power by now. They probably do have sufficient fissile material by now for maybe a handful of nuclear warheads. Tactical kilotons sized nuclear warheads. I'm sure they have some fissile material enough for a handful, maybe 5, maybe 10 warheads. And then you have North Korea, which also is part of, let's say, this alliance. And the North Koreans may have enough fissile material for maybe 20, 25, 30 nuclear warheads, maybe 50 nuclear warheads. Let's, if you want to, inflate the numbers a little bit. And you have that. China is the world's second largest economy. So that is in in this alliance's favor. But if you look at the hard power score of these nations, I had at some point in time calculated that I think the American alliance kind of outstrips the hard power of the China, Russia, etc. alliance. And don't have the calculations right now on demand, but when it comes to the Pacific theater, I think the China, Russia, etc. alliance has a significant advantage over the Americans. But if you look at the global theater, including the Indian Ocean, the Pacific, the Atlantic, everything put together, I think the Americans and the West still are more powerful if you add up the hard power scores of the coalitions and make them stand off against each other. Overall, the Americans still have the advantage. So I'm not sure if it's right to compare the current situation with that of the Second World War. There are significant, interesting parallels for sure. The way the multipolarity is emerging, the way there's a slow bifurcation, ongoing bifurcation of the world order, all of that, it kind of parallels what we have seen in the past during the World War I-II era, the European tribal wars, the Western tribal wars. Does this alliance have the potential to beat the West if World War III happens? Well, if World War III happens, you're going to have fighting, we're going to have military action between nuclear powers, which is extremely dangerous. And if World War III happens, and if there's a single nuke that's used, it's going to end the world. So no one's going to win. We all lose. So, but if, let's assume that nuclear weapons are not used, in that case, I think it's going to cause significant devastation to Russia, to China, to the US as well. Because the Chinese will seek to take out the American aircraft carriers, and they have the capability to do that. They can use swarms of drones, maybe 2,000, 3,000 drones descending on an aircraft carrier strike group. How many can you take out? And then you can use a ballistic missile, the Dongfeng, whatever they have. So they can take out American aircraft carrier strike groups. Then what do the Americans do? The Chinese can take out Guam if they want. They can take out various Japanese assets. The Japanese also will respond. Taiwanese will respond. So it's going to cause a lot of devastation on both sides. And then if nukes are used, we're done. We're fried. So we don't want World War III. But overall, I think the Americans have the advantage. Overall, the American-led alliance, which is the Western alliance, against the putative China, Russia, etc., Iran, North Korea alliance. Okay, next question is by Praveen Gudaparthi. Pakistan has started the asbe-ishtekab something, foreign language, I don't know, something operation on the Tehreek Taliban Pashtun, Pakistan. Okay, Pashtun, yeah. Will this conflict turn into a war between Afghanistan and Pakistan, and will Bharat experience any spillover of this? So the Pakistanis have done all these so-called alleged operations against homegrown, etc., terrorists multiple times in the past. I remember there was some Operation Zarbe something, and all weird names they gave to these operations, but they've done a multitude of such operations. And the objective of these operations is always to kind of send a message to the world that we are an anti-terrorist nation and we take action against terrorists and all that. Especially when they are in trouble and they need loans from other countries, and these countries are kind of hesitant because Pakistan is the global epicenter of terror. So they do these operations periodically to do lip service to their claim that they are against terrorism. And they claim that this organization, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, is supported by the Afghan Taliban, and it is given shelter and support and material aid and whatever else from Kabul, from Afghanistan. Obviously, the Taliban administration denies this. But in the past, the Pakistanis have done cross-border shelling and operations and all that, even airstrikes in the past, and now they seem to have started this new ASBE something operation, which seems to be aimed at the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So, what is the objective of this operation? It's to claim, to sell this idea to the world that Pakistan is serious in its anti-terror stand, which is really funny. But okay, but what's really happened, I think, is the Chinese have pressurized the Pakistanis into launching this operation, because there's been a lot of anti-China sentiment, especially in Western Pakistan, in Pakistan occupied Balochistan, etc. Chinese assets, Chinese engineers, Chinese citizens have been targeted. A few Chinese individuals have lost their lives in these operations and all that. So, and Balochistan, if in case you don't know, it neighbors uh, Afghanistan. So you go into Pakistan, and Balochistan, as you see, north of Balochistan, you have Afghanistan, and west of Balochistan, you obviously have Iran. Um, so the Chinese seem to have pressurized the Pakistanis into into launching this military operation, so supposedly anti-terrorism operation, and that's what it is. So it will certainly, if this operation progresses, I think the operation started a couple of weeks ago or something, and it's gonna be something that's gonna be aimed at Afghanistan in some way or the other. And the Taliban will not take it sitting down, so there could be some cross-border activity, and you could have, you know, some kind of fighting between the Taliban and the Pakistan army. That could happen. And will this conflict turn into a war between Afghanistan and Pakistan depends on the severity, intensity, etc. of this military operation. Will the Pakistani soldiers, the armed forces, make cross-border forays into Afghanistan? Will they target positions within Afghanistan? Will they target Afghan military positions? Will they target Afghan civilians? Will they actually cross the border into Afghanistan? If that happens, that's a serious escalation. And if the Pakistanis don't withdraw immediately, then there's going to be significant, even more escalation. And if this happens multiple times, you could see an upsurge in the fighting, and that could, if in that case, it could actually turn into an Afghanistan-Pakistan war. Will that happen? Well, in whose interests is this, and in whose interests is this not? So you may know, hopefully, that it is alleged that the Americans are paying a weekly stipend of maybe 50 or maybe $80 million in cash to the Taliban in Afghanistan, which tells you that the Taliban is essentially a US proxy, okay, in Afghanistan. And the Pakistanis are also a US proxy, okay. So the Americans obviously will not want a war between their two proxies, their two vassals. They will not want that. It looks like the Chinese want to foment a war in this manner. And the Pakistanis obviously want to have multiple masters. They would like to have the Chinese on their side so that they can offset the Americans, that sort of thing. So the Chinese are trying to play multiple sides, and the Americans, I think, will not like this. And the American pressure is way greater than the Chinese pressure. So I think overall, I think this will be managed. I don't think it will go out of bounds. And even if there is significant hostility and if there are significant hostilities and military action, I don't think it's going to affect India. I don't think it will affect Bharat because the Afghanistan Pakistan border is on the other side. We currently don't have an actual land border with Afghanistan as of now. It's a temporary matter, but that's where we are. As you can see, we have on the map the you know this patch of land which is the border between India and Afghanistan. But as of now, it is in Pakistani hands. POK, Pakistan occupied Kashmir and Gilgit Baltistan. So I don't think it's going to spill over into Bharat. And we certainly have the capability and the wherewithal to prevent any such spillover from happening. Okay, next question. Where's the next question? If it ever comes. Okay, this is by Aviral Chauhan. Why does Israel support Azerbaijan with arms against Armenia? Is it because of Iran's support for Armenia, or is there more to it? Also, why does Iran support a Christian state Armenia against the Shia state Azerbaijan? Insert mind-boggling emoji. Yeah. So the deal is this: the Caucasus region is maybe the second most complicated region in the world after the Balkans. The Balkans have this tremendously complicated uh, situation, extremely complicated history. It's such a mess, and I think the Caucasus region kind of comes close to that. So let's go to the map of the Caucasus region. It's the region between the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. This region here, southern Russia, uh, Chechnya, and Dagestan, and obviously the nations of Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. Now, as you know, Azerbaijan is a Shia majority nation, part of the erstwhile USSR. So, and Armenia was also part of the erstwhile USSR, and it's a Christian nation, probably the oldest, one of the oldest Christian nations in the world. And these two nations, Armenia and Azerbaijan, have been at loggerheads for a very long time. The Turks tried to destroy Armenia. They conducted a genocide of the Armenians in Anatolia, in Turkey. There was a significant Armenian population in Turkey, which no longer exists. And the Turks and the Azerbaijanis would like to see Armenia be wiped off the map so that they can create a pan-Turan corridor all the way to Turkmenistan, all the Turkic nations. Now, Tehran, Iran, is a Shia nation, and Iran has a significant, Iran is an ambitious nation, so is Turkey. And these two nations are obviously on opposite sides. When you have two reasonably powerful nations with a common border, they will never be friends. And they have conflicting ambitions and so on and so forth. So Azerbaijan, despite being a Shia nation, is a Turkic nation. Okay, and it is very much an ally of Turkey. You could say it's a proxy of Turkey. Iran has a significant Azeri population in this region, in the Azerbaijan province of Iran, and Iran is worried about the Azerbaijani citizens who may perhaps be inclined to support Turkey and Azerbaijan. And Israel sees Iran as a mortal enemy. That's why they support Azerbaijan. And Armenia, despite being a Christian nation, because Turkey and Azerbaijan are against Armenia, and if Armenia disappears, then it's a disaster for Iran. That's why Iran supports Armenia. And Russia is also involved. I'm not going to go into that. It's a very complicated matter. India and Iran are essentially supporting Armenia, and Israel is on the other side. It's supporting Turkey and Azerbaijan in this matter. So this goes beyond religion. Okay, at the end of the day, power is not about religion. And geopolitics is not about religion. It's about national interest and national ambitions. And when you have Islamic nations like Azerbaijan and Iran and Turkey with conflicting ambitions, then they will be happy to support a non-Islamic nation to advance their objectives and their ambitions. That's how it goes. Well, it's a very complicated matter, but I hope I've given a reasonably good overview of what's happening. Next question is by Rodrajit Sarkar. Can you tell something about the Monroe Doctrine? Did the US successfully implement the doctrine? Does India follow any such doctrine? Okay, what was the Monroe Doctrine? There was this guy called James Monroe who was one of the presidents of the US in the first quarter of the 19th century. And this doctrine was put in place in 1823, if I am not mistaken. And this doctrine stated that uh, that European colonization will no longer be allowed in the Americas, in the Western Hemisphere. Let's take a look at a map of the globe. Okay, and what's the Eastern Hemisphere? What's the Western Hemisphere? The Western Hemisphere is essentially everything west of the UK. Okay, you draw a line across the globe from the North Pole to the South Pole, west of the UK, of the British Islands. Everything west of that is the Western Hemisphere, and there are two hemispheres, Eastern and Western. Okay, so the entire Western Hemisphere essentially is the Americas, North America and South America. And the Monroe Doctrine said that European colonization in the Americas and the Western Hemisphere would no longer be tolerated. It would be regarded as a hostile activity, hostile action by the US, and the US will not allow this. It also said that whichever European colonies already existed in the Western Hemisphere, the Americans would not do anything about that. They will allow them to exist, but no new colonial activity will be allowed, and so on and so forth. So it was all about the US saying that we now own the Western Hemisphere. And initially, in the initial years, the British supported the Americans and they enforced the Monroe Doctrine. The British, at that time, the UK was more powerful than the US. Okay, and they had a much more powerful navy than the US, and they actually supported the US in that, the UK. But in the late 19th century, the Americans developed a powerful navy and they became more powerful than the UK, and so on. And then eventually, the Monroe Doctrine took such a form that the Americans said that they would have the right to interfere in any nation in South America if it went against American interests. And they did that. They did much of that. They invaded and occupied various nations and did regime change operations, and then conducted elections to make everything look good, and so on and so forth. That was the Monroe Doctrine. But how did this happen? We have to understand the history, right? This guy Monroe puts forth the doctrine in 1823. But what was the background for this? The background for this doctrine was the Napoleonic Wars. Napoleon Bonaparte was the emperor eventually of France and Italy, and he of the world, kind of following the footsteps of Julius Caesar, kind of, and he fought everybody. He fought every single European power, and he was very successful initially, but eventually he was exiled to the island of Saint Helena in 1815. So because of the Napoleonic Wars, various European nations like Spain, Portugal, etc., lost contact with their colonies in South America. And the governors they had installed in these colonies, they became independent rulers, and these nations gained independence because the European powers were too busy being embroiled in the Napoleonic Wars, which a period which lasted 15-20 years, roughly, maybe less. Look it up. So because of Napoleon's wars in Europe, the various European colonies in Latin America became independent. And then the Americans said, okay, the time is ripe for us to now make our move. And in 1823, they put forth the Monroe Doctrine. So the US initially needed British help to implement the doctrine, but eventually it became powerful enough to enforce it on its own in the late 19th century and in the 20th century. Does India follow any such doctrine? India is not powerful enough to follow any such doctrine. Okay, if you look at India's neighborhood, India does not follow a Monroe Doctrine. You have Nepal, in which there is clear Chinese interference, which we ourselves have created the situation that has enabled this to happen. Our governments in the late 20th century, the 1990s, 2000s, essentially not enforced, but enabled regime change in Nepal, and the destruction of the last Hindu monarchy in the world, and the takeover of Nepal by the communists, Maoists, and pro-China elements. So we allowed this to happen. Our governments allowed that to happen. We don't have a Monroe Doctrine. We have an anti-Monroe Doctrine. We want everybody in our neighborhood to be influenced by others. We have Chinese interference in Nepal. We have Chinese interference in Bhutan. The Chinese claim Indian territory. Bangladesh is fine. There is tremendous US interference in Myanmar. The Americans are bullying Bangladesh right now. They want to carve out a Christian nation out of Burma, Bangladesh, and Manipur. The Americans, okay. There is Chinese interference over here. The Burmese, they gave a couple of islands to the Chinese in the Andaman Sea. When it comes to Sri Lanka, there used to be Norwegian and Western interference there. Pakistan is a puppet of the US. Afghanistan is kind of you could say a soft vassal of the US. So everywhere around India there is external interference, and allegedly there is even external interference within India itself. So India doesn't follow a Monroe Doctrine. India should follow a Monroe Doctrine, but that you can only do if you are powerful enough. You need to be a genuinely powerful nation. So India may be 20 years away from that. And the powers that be want to ensure that this never happens. So yeah, it's a kind of a very important phase in India's history, make or break kind of phase. Right now, India doesn't have the ability to follow, to enforce an Indian version of a Monroe Doctrine. Next question. Oopsie daisy. Okay, here we are. It's by Gautami. Many times you said leadership is very important for the development of a country. But say Japan, Germany, or EU countries, these nations developed very rapidly after the Second World War, despite not having any good leaders. And now they are almost developed countries. Well, the EU is fully developed. Japan was definitely fully developed. Germany as well. So do you agree that leadership did not really play much of a role for the development of these nations, but their education policies played a much bigger role during the time of development? What are your thoughts? Interesting question, and I'm glad that people try and find loopholes so that they can challenge various statements, which is good. So, what's the deal? I have always said, and I still say, that leadership is the most crucial thing that a nation has. Without great leadership, you will never have a good future. The quality of leadership is the most important thing in the long term development, in the long term future of a nation. Think about it like this. Let's say I have spoken about this before, but let me give you this example again so that you understand. Okay. Let's say you have a nation whose inhabitants are sheep. You know, sheep, sheep. So you have a nation whose inhabitants are sheep. None of these sheep has any leadership qualities, no good leaders. Okay. But they have the good shepherd who takes care of them. And they have territorial integrity. The enclosure of the sheep is taken care of. No wolf can come inside. And the sheep have a great lifestyle. They have tremendous development. They have good facilities for sleeping, for shelter against the wind and the rain and whatnot. They have copious quantities of food, and they are all in great health. Free healthcare is there. Everything is great. Okay, fully developed nation of the sheep, but no leaders. But what's really happening? What's really happening? Every day, one or two sheep disappear, right? Where do they go? They think they're going somewhere for a walk and all, and eventually they realize they've reached the slaughterhouse. So that's an example for you to kind of ponder about. Okay, development isn't enough. Do these wonderful sheep who are enjoying this luxurious lifestyle, do they have the right to self-determination? Do they have self-determination? Do their descendants have a great long-term future, prosperity, independence, self-determination? Do they have self-determination in terms of their lifestyle and culture? No, they are following a lifestyle imposed on them by somebody else. Sheep actually want to climb hills and be in rugged places, but they are being made to sit in a large enclosure and just relax. It's an unnatural lifestyle for them. So My point is this: Japan is a nation under foreign occupation, US occupation, permanent US occupation. So is Germany. The US needed to create an alternative to the system that the USSR was showing to the world. So they needed nations to encircle the USSR. They needed the entire Western world, the NATO dominated world, to emerge. And they needed these countries to be powerful and prosperous, but controlled by them. Okay? And they needed to show the world that, see, our system is better. The nations where you have the American system, the Western led system, these nations are prosperous. They have good lifestyles, great living standards, great economies. But who did these economies serve? They served the US, because all of these nations were, well, part of the, what do you call it? The US dollar was king, wasn't it? And when it comes to the Bank of Japan, when it comes to every single decision taken by Japan in terms of foreign policy, economic policy, military policy, it was all dictated by the US. So it served the US interest. The same goes for Germany. Yes, these nations were prosperous, but these nations can be destroyed like that. What's happening to Japan now? It was the world's second largest economy in the 80s. It was threatening to surpass the US. Today, Japan is becoming a middle income nation. It's going backwards, backwards, backwards. Look at Germany, it's under recession. How did this happen to Japan? How did this happen to Germany? Well, read up the Plaza Accords. The Americans destroyed the Japanese economy in a very slow motion decline since the 80s. What happened to Germany? Nord Stream 2. The Germans needed, any powerful economic machine needs copious and cheap energy. You cut that off, the economy dies. It starves. That's what's happening to Germany right now. Germany is in recession. The economic miracle is over. The Americans can create this, they can destroy this. You may have a well-developed country, but if the fate of your nation is not in your hands, or in the hands of leaders who genuinely represent you, then you can be taken out anytime. And that's what's happening right now. Leadership is crucial, it is critical, it is non-negotiable. Oh yes, I have great living standards. Tomorrow it will be taken away, but then what? Your fate, your destiny has to be in your own hands. Okay? Development without being in control of your destiny means you are being developed for somebody else's benefit. The sheep are being fattened so that they can be slaughtered when the time is right. That's the deal. Leadership is critical, it is crucial, it is non-negotiable. Let's say a very bad hypothetical example, which will never happen, but let's say India becomes a US vassal or a Chinese vassal. Okay, right now it's not. Let's say it happens. And they develop India. Okay, they impose a wonderful education system on India, and they give great living standards and all, and they will make sure that your culture is wiped out, and you become a market for them to dump their goods in, and you don't produce anything, but you only give services. And then when the time is right, they will pull the plug and everything will disappear and you will have nothing left. So you don't want that. You need great leadership. Great leadership is non-negotiable. It is critical. Without that, you are nothing. You're dead. Please understand that. Please understand that. Rajat says, when do we send back the illegal immigrants to their respective countries? And when that happens, how will the foreign relations change with those countries? And where is the Chavda Index? First of all, Chavda Index, it's done, but I need to make the website presentable before I release it. So it could happen in a couple of weeks. Yeah, it is done. It's the index of hard power, global hard power rankings. It will come out soon. And thank you for the reminder. I appreciate that. About illegal immigrants in India. So we have an illegal immigration problem. Mainly, it's Bangladeshis and various individuals who were once based in Burma, Rohingyas and the so-called cookies. So we eventually will need to send them back to the respective countries. The cookies, I don't even know if they're Burmese because they don't speak the Burmese language. They don't respect the Burmese culture, traditions, and all that. They actually may be from Yunnan or something. They don't have any allegiance to Burma or to India, even though they may claim whatever. When it comes to the Rohingyas, again, they don't have any allegiance to Burma. They don't have any allegiance to India, but they want to live in India and enjoy all the benefits. When it comes to Bangladeshis, well, what can I say? How many do we have, Bangladeshis? At least 50 million, if not 100 million in India. So yeah, there is a big problem. And we are doing thus far nothing about this horrific problem. Uh, so let's say the government of India, if surprisingly gets its act together and decides to repatriate these illegal infiltrators back to their respective countries. Let's say the unthinkable happens. Let's say a miracle happens and the government wakes up and does that. What's going to happen? Will it spoil India's relations with those nations? Well, it depends on how we deal with those governments. Of course, if we send back 50 million Bangladeshis to Bangladesh, it's going to cause a huge amount of pressure on the local economy, on the Bangladeshi economy. So all their excess riffraff they're sending to India, and we are absorbing that, and we are absorbing that pain. So right now, our economy has to support 50 million, 100 million extra individuals who actually give nothing back to the country. So let's say we identify them all and deport them to Bangladesh. Let's say 50 million people. It's going to cause a tremendous amount of hardship immediately to Bangladesh. But that's not our problem, right? These are not our people. So will that cause a deterioration in the relationship between India and Bangladesh? It could, or maybe not. If we deal with the government of Bangladesh properly and we explain that this needs to be done and you need to take this and we're going to maybe help you out in some way, maybe it works fine. But the opposition politicians in Bangladesh will definitely raise a hue and cry, and they may use this as the means to defeat the Sheikh Hasina government or the current government in future elections. So it's one way or the other, it will have some repercussions. But that doesn't mean that we should keep on saddling ourselves with this unnecessary, unneeded burden of low quality individuals who are not Indian citizens but benefiting from the Indian economy. We need to get rid of them in a dignified, civilized manner. Means repatriate them, deport them, and repatriate them to their country. Same goes for the individuals who have emerged out of Burma. The Rohingyas and the Cookies, two very different classes of individuals, but both neither are Indian citizens. So this needs to happen. Burma no longer even has a government. It's kind of a lawless place right now, complete civil war situation. The Burmese government, the officially the official Burmese government is not in control of the entire nation, maybe half the nation. There are all these ragtag tribal groups running amok everywhere. And behind all of this is a very well crafted, organized, coordinated campaign by the church and by the United States, who have geopolitical reasons for doing this. It's a complete mess actually, as far as we are concerned. But if India does deport all these individuals to these countries, we will have to deal with Bangladesh properly. If we do this, when it comes to Burma, there is half the country, there's no government, so you can just push them back. Yeah, but you've got to put your national interest first, long-term national interest first. You cannot sacrifice your long-term interests for the sake of short-term expediency. And that is something I hope the Indian government understands and realizes. Okay, Imran Naimi says, why do Iranians call their language Farsi? I have read many books, including the Shahnameh, and the works of famous poets. But they call the language Dari rather than Farsi. In old books, I did not see a language called Farsi, but Dari. Why is that? Are the Iranians concealing the truth? And why are the majority of mathematicians, scientists, and poets born in Afghanistan, why are they referred to as Iranians, Irani in Google? Is this not an example of injustice or unfairness? Good question. Yeah. So the Persian language has evolved over at least 3,000 years. Okay. The Achaemenid dynasty, the Hakshamanish dynasty, the language spoken at that time was Old Persian, which was kind of like an Apabhransh daughter language of Sanskrit. Read the Bhagasthana inscription, Behistun inscription. It sounds like a slightly modified version of Sanskrit with slightly different pronunciation. But apart from that, you can actually understand what's written. I can understand what's written there because it sounds so similar to Sanskrit, and so on. That was Old Persian. Then you had Middle Persian. Then you had something called New Persian, okay, which was spoken during the Sasanian times. And the Sasanians were invaded by the Arabs, and that's when the Islamization of Persia happened. And Firdausi lived roughly 1,000 years ago. And Firdausi wrote the Shahnameh in the New Persian language, which is the Persian that is kind of still spoken today. Okay. Now, you are right, Imran Naimi, that at that time, about 1,000 years ago, The language was called Dari. It was the dialect of Persian that was spoken in the court, the royal court of the Sasanian, uh, kingdom. That's the kind of thing it was. For example, the Hindustani language, the Urdu language, is the language that emerged out of the military camps and courts of the Turks who ruled India for some time. Similarly, the new Persian language emerged as a dialect which was spoken in the courts of the Sasanian kingdom, etc., during the Arabic occupation and all that. And the language has remained pretty much stable the past 1,000 or so years, primarily because of the influence of the Shahnameh of Firdausi. But Firdausi was not the first writer who wrote in this new Persian language, which was called Dari at the time. I think there was a guy called Rudaki, who was born in present-day Tajikistan, who was the first writer in this language. Let's see what Google has to say about Rudaki. Let's go to Rudaki. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but let's see. Rudaki. Rudaki. Okay, so this guy was a poet, singer, musician, etc., who's regarded as the first major poet to write in New Persian. That's right. And he was born where? He was under the Samanids. He composed more than 180,000 verses. Only a small portion of his work has survived. Most notably, a small part of his versification of the Kalila va Dimna, a collection of Indian fables, which was the Panchatantra, a Persian version of the Panchatantra. Anyway, some of that has survived. He was born in the Rudak area, which is in western Tajikistan. All right. So he was the first major Persian poet to write in New Persian, and it was called Dari. It was called Dari. But now it is called Farsi, right? It's called Farsi now. So what does Farsi mean? First of all, it should be Parsi, not Farsi, because Persia is Paras, right? The land of the Parshva people, the descendants of the Parshva clan. So it should be Parsi. The Persians who escaped the Arabic invasion of Persia and came into India, they are still called Parsi. So the language should be Parsi, but because the Arabs don't know how to say pa, they replace that with fa. And that Arabic pronunciation tradition has kind of continued in Persia, which is why the language is called Farsi. But the original term for the language of the new Persian language was Dari. And today in Afghanistan, the language is still called Dari. And it's essentially the same as the Parsi language, the Farsi language, which is spoken in Persia. But maybe some differences, maybe some minor differences. And there is a Dari that is spoken in Tajikistan as well. I think it's called Tajiki these days. So every nation wants to give its own name to the language, but it is the same language essentially. So yes, you are right. The language was originally called Dari, not Farsi. And even the Farsi name isn't right. It should be Parsi. So I'm not sure if the Iranians are concealing the truth. Maybe they don't even know the truth. Maybe it's the truth has gone so far back that you don't know about it. They don't know about it. And lots of scientists, poets, etc., scholars were certainly born in Afghanistan. But because they wrote in the Persian language, they are incorrectly called Iranians or whatever on Google. I think it's not the fault of the Iranians, of the people of Iran. I think it's the fault of the Western scholars who write the history of the world. And then we just follow that blindly. The West oversimplifies everything. They don't understand our people. Look, India, Afghanistan, Persia, the subcontinent, etc., we are very different from the West. We are a very complex people. We have a very old ancient history. The Westerners don't understand us, okay? And they try to oversimplify everything. And they obviously in their they have the superiority complex that they will decide what the world is like, and everybody has to agree with that. So they will write our histories, and then that distorted, incorrect version of history will then be slavishly taught in our education system. I'm sure there is this significant inferiority complex in Persia as well. I mean, the Persians believe in the Aryan invasion myth. The Persians use many French words in their language. The Persians, what is merci? Huh? You don't have a word of your own. What's merci? Why do the Persians use the word merci? I mean, I know you don't want to use shukran or whatever. I'm sure you have a word of your own. Why do you have to use foreign words? But that's the deal. Even the Persians try to do that. There is an inferiority complex there. Um, so it is what it is. Our history has been distorted tremendously. We in India know that very well. By now, at least some of us are waking up to that. I've been saying that for a very long time. And the subcontinent, Afghanistan, Persia, the same thing applies everywhere. So there is a lot of stuff that, a lot of achievements that came out of Afghanistan that are incorrectly ascribed to Iran. I mean, Zarathustra, the founder of the Zoroastrian religion, he was born in Afghanistan, in Gandhar. He was not born in Persia. Okay, so there is that also, and I'm not sure how many people know that Zarathustra. So it is definitely unjust. It is unfair, but I'm not sure if the Persians are responsible for this injustice and unfairness. The Persians are simply following the West, the lead of the West, like most people do in India as well. If an Indian historian says something, an Indian scholar says something, nobody believes that. But if the same thing is spoken or written by a Westerner, a white-skinned guy, oh my God, yes, that is the gospel truth. That's how it is. So it's not just India; it's the entire region that suffers from the white man's burden. Right? Okay, next question. Okay, here we are. Waiting for it to appear. Well, give me a second. Okay, this one will appear. Will this appear now? Okay, here we are. Rodrajit Sarkar says, did ancient India establish any intercontinental trade routes like the Silk Road? Which land and sea routes did ancient Indians use to trade with other countries? Okay, let's go back to the map. Where's the map? Here's the map. India obviously had a tremendous amount of trade with significant portions of the world. For example, there we have found Saraswati Sindhu era outposts in present day Oman. Port region, ports, at least one port I know of, which was essentially an Indian outpost in Oman from the Saraswati Sindhu period, the Harappan period of India's history. So we have that, okay? And during the Saraswati Sindhu era, the Harappan era, we were trading with Mesopotamia. That is well known. And the Mesopotamians, they called us Meluha. So we were trading with them. Then we know that Indians were trading with Egypt about 2000 BC or so, thereabouts. There is evidence of that. We know that the Indian bull, the Zebu bull, the Indus Valley bull, first appears in Egypt at least around 2000 BC or something, which is 4000 years before today. So we were trading with that. So we had this sea route via the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf region, and from there we would trade with Mesopotamia. And when it comes to Egypt, we would trade via the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea and go all the way to Egypt. Then I'm sure we had overland trade routes with Central Asia, etc. And we, after China emerged as a civilization, we were trading with China. Overland, which we now call the Silk Road, but it was going on for a very long time. We were definitely trading with Suvarna Bhumi. The great people of Kalinga were trading with Suvarna Bhumi, which is Southeast Asia, Thailand, Myanmar, etc., Cambodia, Vietnam, all the way, for at least 3000 years before today. And that was trade done across the sea via ships. So there was that, and we know very well for a fact that India had a tremendous amount of trade with the Roman Empire. We were exporting our goods to the Romans, finished goods and spices and all that. And in exchange for that, the Romans were sending India gold coins, and so on. So there were multiple trade routes. And Indians have been living in Eastern Africa for centuries, maybe thousands of years. And that also was definitely happening via sea. So we had ships and Indians had settled down in this region. Madagascar, Mozambique, Tanzania, Kenya, Somalia, etc. The entire east coast of Africa is deeply, deeply influenced by India. So India has always been a maritime civilization, a shipbuilding civilization from the days of the Rig Veda. So we leveraged those technological abilities to trade with so many parts of the world. So that was the deal. And I can give you examples, hard evidence of Indian merchants, let's say, Indian traders having a presence in the Roman Empire. Let's go to our friend Google and let me show you something interesting. So, Indian statue in what was it, Pompeii? So they discover archaeologists have discovered an Indian statue with a style that's similar to Chandraketugarh or Gandhar in Rome, in one of the villas in this region. And this clearly was the home of an Indian merchant who was living in Pompeii. Maybe it's goddess Lakshmi, maybe it is a Yakshi or something. We don't know quite who this lady was, but it is clearly an Indian statue, that is 100% sure. And it was discovered in Pompeii. So an Indian merchant was living in a villa in Pompeii, and Pompeii, as you may know, was destroyed in a catastrophic volcanic eruption. Mount Vesuvius destroyed the cities of Pompeii and Herculaneum around 100 AD, roughly 80 AD, 100 AD. Look it up if you're interested. So that's evidence of trade, and we have tremendous amounts of gold coins, vases, amphoras, etc. on India's east coast, on India's west coast, found all over the place, which all originates in Rome. So that tells you there was a tremendous amount of trade. So there's ample evidence of India trading with Mesopotamia, India trading with India having outposts in the Arabian Peninsula 5,000 years before today, India trading with Egypt 4,000 years before today, and India trading with Rome 2,000 years before today, and India trading with Southeast Asia at least 3,000 years before today. Tremendous trade, and China came later. China emerged around 3,000 years before today, and we started trading with them about, I think, during the Mauryan era and afterwards, when the Chinese became an actual civilization. So we've been trading with everybody. We've always had this policy that we want to be friends with everyone, we'll trade with everyone, we'll have relations with everybody, good relations. We've always been that sort of culture and civilization. Rodharjit Sarkar again says, in ancient times, did people from other dharmic countries come on pilgrimage to the holy sites of Hindus and Buddhists in Bharat, in India? Yes, we clearly know about the people from Eastern Asia who came to India for a variety of reasons. Many of them came for education. Many of them came in search of knowledge and wisdom and sacred Indian texts, philosophical texts, religious texts, whether it is dharmic texts, Hindu texts, Buddhist texts, whatever. We know of Xuanzang, who came from during the Tang dynasty, who came on an arduous, long journey to India. The moment he reaches Gandhar, the Bamia Valley, he says, "Thank God, I'm finally in India." And then he comes further down south and all that. So we know of him. We know of many pilgrims from many other Chinese and Korean pilgrims who studied in Nalanda. They would actually spend a year or two in Indonesia to study Sanskrit and prepare themselves for the entrance exam in Nalanda. But that is obviously about studies. But you had pilgrims coming in from various parts of the world for religious reasons as well. And let me show you an interesting piece of information. Now, you may have heard about the Sri Padmanabha Swami temple, right? Sri Padmanabha Swami temple in Kerala. Now let's take a look at what Wikipedia has to say about this. Statutory warning, Wikipedia is not always a reliable source of information, but let's see what Wikipedia has to say about this temple. And why am I showing you this right now? So we know we know, right? It's got a tremendous amount of wealth, this temple. So it's got a treasure. And what do we know? Okay, there's a tremendous treasure that has been recovered. I mean, it's not been recovered. It is known to exist there, and it has somehow escaped the greedy, grasping claws of the British and other invaders of India, occupiers of India. The treasure found so far is considered to be by far the largest collection of items of gold and fully precious stones in the recorded history of the world. Just one temple. Okay. And we had hundreds of such temples in India. So, tremendous amount of wealth. Now, where did this wealth come from, right? That's the question. So these valuables are believed to have been accumulated in the temple over several thousand years. So this temple is mentioned in Tamil in Sangam literature. It's thousands of years old. Okay, by the way, it's a golden temple. It is the original golden temple, the true golden temple of India. So the valuables are believed to have been accumulated in the temple over several thousand years, having been donated to the deity and subsequently stored there by various dynasties. Our dynasties like the Cheras, Pandyas, Travancore royal family, the Kolatharis, the Pallavas, Cholas, and many other kings in the recorded history of both South India and beyond, and from the rulers and traders of Mesopotamia, Jerusalem, Greece, Rome, and various colonial powers from Europe and other countries as well. You understand that? Okay. What evidence do we have of that? I'll tell you what evidence we have of that. Let me look up and down. Somewhere we're going to find something over here. What did they find in this place? Let me look for a specific keyword. Okay. The objects include lakhs of golden coins of the Roman Empire. Lakhs, hundreds of thousands of golden coins from the Roman Empire, and much more stuff. Okay. So, this is just one example that tells you that there were kings from Mesopotamia, from Jerusalem, from Rome, and various other parts of the world who were donating tremendous amounts of treasure to this temple. There were merchants, there were kings, there were rulers and travelers and visitors and whatnot who were donating tremendous amounts of wealth to this temple. Let me show you another thing, okay? Show you another example. Once again, let's go to our friend Google. Okay, have you heard of the Roopkund Lake? Roopkund Lake. So very intriguing lake, and something very strange happened there. Ancient DNA of skeletons. So it's a lake in Uttarakhand in northern India. It's half the time it's frozen, and this lake is known for a tremendous number of skeletons that are found there. Okay, skeletons that are lying there. And recently, these skeletons have been DNA tested. So this is what the lake looks like. It's a reasonably small lake, and it has a tremendous number of skeletons there, human skeletons. And the mystery is who are these people? Who are the people who died there? Why did they die? What did they die of? So, what does the journal Nature have to say about this? Let me accept, unfortunately, the cookies. You see, Dr. Neeraj Rai, who has been on the podcast, he is part of this study. So, it's and these people, this is a pilgrimage region, okay? It's a place of pilgrimage, the Uttarakhand region. So, several hundred individuals of unknown origin scattered skeletal remains. So they did a genome-wide DNA thing of etc. etc. They clustered into three distinct groups. A group of 23 individuals have ancestry that falls within the range of variation of present-day subcontinental people. A further 14 have ancestry typical of the Eastern Mediterranean. And we also identify one individual with Southeast Asian-related ancestry. These remains were not deposited simultaneously. The Indian origin people, they died around 800 CE. But evidence of being deposited in more than one event. All the other individuals, the Eastern Mediterranean, etc., died around 1800 CE. Okay, and these were most likely pilgrims who had come on a pilgrimage to the sacred land of Uttarakhand. People from the Eastern Mediterranean region. What is the Eastern Mediterranean, you ask? Well, let's go to Google Maps in case you are wondering what the Eastern Mediterranean is. The Eastern Mediterranean region is Lebanon, Israel, Cyprus, Syria, Egypt, Turkey, etc. So individuals from there had come to the Roopkund Lake for pilgrimage purposes. There's no other reason for them to be there. So you had this going on in India. India is a very strange, intriguing, weird place where people come from all over the world for pilgrimages. Steve Jobs came to India in search of religion. Steve Jobs. He became a disciple of Neem Karoli Baba, and he died with what? Autobiography of a yogi in his hand, and he had that book distributed in his funeral. So India is that sort of land. Okay. Okay, next question. As always, it won't come up. Okay, okay. The questions are not popping up today for some reason. Okay, it came and disappeared. Okay, here we are. This is by Arkapan Ghoshal. Can we say that India was really an independent nation before 1764 when the British won the Battle of Buxar, as our textbooks say? The Delhi Sultanate and the Mughals had ruled India for much more time than the British. So, shouldn't we consider them to be occupiers who destroyed India much before the British or the other Europeans? Okay, so what's the deal? Let's go to our friend Google once more and let us discover what was the deal before that date that you mentioned, 1764. Okay, Maratha Empire 1759, let's say. Okay, let's go to Google Images and see what this has to say. This was the Maratha Empire in 1758. Okay, and if you look properly, it is essentially the entirety of India. So before 1764, when the British won the Battle of Buxar, India, Bharat, was essentially the Maratha Empire. We were not an independent nation, we were an independent empire, we were an independent civilization. The Marathas had liberated India from the Turks, from the foreigners, and essentially established they called Hindavi Swarajya. And the British destroyed that. Okay, the British did not defeat the Turks, the so called Mughals. The British defeated the Hindu Maratha Empire. That's what the British did to India. So, your favorite historians, many of them will claim that the British saved India from the Turks, the Mughals. I'm sure many of your teachers will claim that. Those individuals are ignorant. This is another representation of the Maratha Empire, 1759. And the capital of the empire was Pune at the time. So there you have it. Okay. And of course, you're right. The Turks, they ruled various parts of India, not the whole of India, but they ruled various parts of India for several centuries, not the entirety of India. Here, there, the Delhi Sultanate and various other patches of India and all. Never the whole of India, but they did do that, and they caused a tremendous amount of harm to India. So yes, the Delhi Sultanate, the Turco Mughals, etc., they are indeed occupiers of India, foreign invaders and occupiers of India, who destroyed India, did a tremendous amount of damage and harm and material and damage and genocide in India, the worst genocide the world has ever seen, much before the British and the other Europeans. So I agree with you. Now we will go to the next question. If it loads, there's a problem with the questions loading today. Okay. Let us see if the question loads. Okay, here we have it. Gyanami has two questions. Macaulay, Lord Babington Macaulay, right? That guy. He has always been blamed in India as much as I have read and know, the game had already been prepared before Macaulay's arrival in India. He just came and played his innings. Okay. I've always read that Macaulay's idea was the downward filtration theory. But it is mentioned on Wikipedia that Alexander Duff, the Scottish missionary, proposed a theory which he called the downward filtration theory. Okay. So the British East India Company came to India for the purpose of trade. Okay. They knew that India was this tremendously rich, prosperous subcontinent, and they wanted to trade with India and become rich in the process. So the British East India Company was created sometime around the time that Elizabeth died, the daughter of Henry the Eighth, and it had shareholders, etc., in London, and they started trading with India, and then eventually, after a few centuries, they started running India, ruling India. So their objective was to trade with India, and the purpose of the company was entirely commercial. So, and then what happens is that they start taking control of various parts of India, and then British missionaries wanted to come to India and try harvesting soul vultures, right? They are. So the East India Company opposed that. And the East India Company, the people who came to India, who wrote about India, were extremely, they wrote very positively about India and India's culture. And that's how the awareness of India started building up in the UK and in Europe. And then missionaries wanted to come to India. And then the missionaries, they had very powerful lobbies in Parliament. And eventually they were able to convince the British Parliament to allow missionary activity in India. So this begins around the late 18th century, early 19th century, somewhere around that time. By this time, the East India Company starts gaining a lot of power in India. And the moment the missionaries set foot in India, they start writing atrocity literature about India, all kinds of horrible depictions of India. Because if you want to destroy a culture, civilization, and introduce Christianity, you have to first convince the natives that they are barbaric, and they have to first convince the world that these people, their culture is barbaric, it's primitive, it's backward, it is everything bad that you could imagine. So that's where the atrocity narrative against India begins, and that's all taught as standard history in today's Indian textbooks. Okay, so that's why Indians, all Indians, most Indians have this tremendous inferiority complex. So you are right. The Gyanami, you're right that the game was prepared before Macaulay arrived in India. So Macaulay came to India as their best player, and then he played his innings. You're right. Now about this downward filtration theory. Uh, let's Google this guy Duff. This guy was a Scottish missionary. Let's go to our friend Google once again. What does Google have to say about this gentleman, this individual, Alexander Duff? Alexander Duff. He was Scottish, if I am not mistaken. Let's go to Wikipedia because they will say good things about him, obviously. Was the Scottish Church of Scotland? Yes, I think he was Scottish. He was born in Perthshire, Scotland. So, a scientific liberal reformer of anglicized evangelism across the empire. He founded the Scottish Church College. He played a role in establishing the University of Calcutta, and so on and so forth. And so, one second, where is the downward filtration theory? Where is it? Okay, downward filter theory. So this guy, I think in the 1930s, proposed what he called the downward filter theory, in which he believed that by catering to the middle and upper social classes, the knowledge of Christianity would eventually filter down the social ladder. He promoted the teaching of English in schools, but he still viewed the vernacular as an important language for spreading Christianity. His objective was to spread Christianity, not knowledge. The same goes for this guy Macaulay. So Macaulay was not a missionary, was not an evangelist. He was an imperialist. He wanted India to be fully subjugated by the British. And to do that, he said that we have to destroy the Indian education system, prevent these individuals from studying in their own civilizational and languages and mother tongue, Sanskrit and whatever mother tongues they have, and English should be the medium of education. And the objective of the education system should be to create a class of collaborators who may be brown in skin, but they are white inside, who idolize and worship the white man and the British, and who serve the interests of the British Empire, but they don't have any leadership qualities and they can be clerks and peons at best. And that's the education system we have in India today. Okay, so that's what frustrates me so much about today's education system, and that's why I go on this. Yeah, that's why I speak about it so much. So the downward filtration theory or downward filter theory, it's the same thing. Macaulay said that we have to give upward mobility to Indians only if they are educated in the English language and they are collaborators for the British. And he ensured that there in British India there could be no progress or advancement in life without English language education, and that still exists in India today. And his theory was that, or his objective was that, the collaborators who would eventually be the cream of Indian society, the elite of Indian society, everybody would try and aspire to be like them. And those British ideals and British, all of that would then filter downwards, and eventually after decades and centuries all Indians would become anglicized. Isn't that what's happened today? It's been super successful. So I think Macaulay spoke about the downward filtration filter theory, whatever it was, in 1935, and it looks like this guy Alexander Duff proposed that also sometime in the 1930s. Maybe it is Alexander Duff who said this before Macaulay. Maybe it's all right. It's possible. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Okay, we're gonna have to fight this battle again. The next question, if it appears. Okay, Saurabh Badoria says the Brahui language, a Dravidian tribal language, uh, comes in northern India and did not contain the loan words from Old Iranian, Avestan, and Pashto, but contains words from the Baloch language. Doesn't this debunk the claim that Harappans were Dravidian? I'm not sure if the Brahui language has any connection with the Harappans or with the people of the Saraswati Sindhu region, even though the Brahui language exists where you had Harappa, Mohenjo-daro. So once again, let's go to Google and look for Brahui, shall we? So that we can see the geographical distribution of the Brahui language people, whatever. So this is where you have it. As you can see, it's in Balochistan. Okay, and this is apparently a map of the so-called Dravidian languages. So there is this spot in Pakistan, present-day Pakistan, in Balochistan, which is the region where people speak the Brahui language. Now let's see what Wikipedia once again has to say. Once again, Wikipedia is not reliable, but let's just take a look at what this article looks like. So not the Brahui people, the Brahui language. Okay, so it says it's a Dravidian language. Are we sure about that? History, etc., dialects, phonology, blah 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 blah, etc. It has the Perso-Arabic script. All right. Okay, let's take a look at this. The Brahui lexicon is believed to be about 35% Perso-Arabic origin. Okay, 35% of the vocabulary is Persian and Arabic. 20% is Balochi origin. Balochi is an Indo-Aryan language or Indo-Iranian language. Classified. That's how it's classified linguistically. So 35% Persian Arabic, 20% Balochi, 20% Indo-Aryan, and 15% Dravidian, 10% unknown. So according to this research, which is from these books that are cited over here, which I can't open, the citations are of a couple of books here. So according to this research, it only has about 15% Dravidian words. Now, the same researchers will also say that that Rigvedic Sanskrit also had Dravidian loan words. So then, isn't Rigvedic Sanskrit also a Dravidian language from that perspective? I mean, your logic has to be consistent, doesn't it? So, according to Wikipedia itself, Brahui has about 15% Dravidian words. Now, I haven't gone into detail and tried to see what words are of Dravidian origin, but it looks like it's mostly 30% Persian Arabic, 20% Balochi, 20% Indo-Aryan, 15% Dravidian. So if the smallest contribution is Dravidian, how can you claim it's a Dravidian language? I'm not sure how it works, but there seems to be something fishy going on here. Okay, I'm not sure how Dravidian this language is. I mean, can Tamil people or Kannada speaking people or Telugu speaking people understand Brahui? I doubt it very much. So that's what I would say. I find this not very convincing, and I am not sure if it has any relationship with the ancient people who once lived in this region and the language they spoke, which is the people of the Saraswati Sindhu era of our history. And I'm not sure when the Brahui speaking people arrived in this region. Did they migrate from somewhere else? Or is this a language that has existed here for centuries, thousands of years? We don't know that. Okay. So I would raise a great amount of skepticism when it comes to Brahui, whether it is a Dravidian language at all. If it only has, according to Wikipedia itself, just 15%, Dravidian vocabulary. There are scholars of Sanskrit who claim that even the Rig Veda has so-called Dravidian loan words. So by that same logic, would that not make the Rig Vedic Sanskrit also a Dravidian language? Right? Anyhow. Next question. Okay, I'm going to again have to fight this battle. Come on. Here we are. Sangeeta says, how did Roosevelt become the US president 3 times? Well, actually, Theodore Roosevelt was US president 4 times. Was it Franklin Roosevelt? Uh, 1 second. Roosevelt, 4 times president. Okay, it was Franklin D. Roosevelt, not Theodore, not Teddy. It was Franklin Roosevelt, who was president of the US 4 times, not 3 times. So, how did that happen? Because in the US, you have a 2 term limit, right? I mean, Obama wanted to still be in power, but he had to demit office after 2 terms. The same happened with Clinton and so on and so forth, right? So, what happened? How did this guy, Roosevelt, become president 4 times? 1932, he won. 1936, he won. 1940, he won. He won in 1944 again. And he became the president for the 4th time and died early into his tenure as the during his 4th term as president. How did this happen? First of all, he was clearly popular. And secondly, there was no term limits in those days. But after he was elected 4 times, the US Constitution was amended. There was some amendment in the Constitution, and a 2 term limit was then encoded in the US Constitution. I think in the 1950s, early 1950s, because of this 4 time presidency of Roosevelt. So he became president 4 times because there was no term limit at that time. Okay. Okay, Annabeth Jackson says, how to increase confidence and train yourself to not be too soft-hearted. Sorry, not a history geopolitics question. I think confidence comes from competence. Whatever you do, if you're really competent, super competent at that makes you confident. So if you are, let's say, an athlete and you're not good enough, then obviously you won't be confident. But if you're super competent, you do everything better than everybody else, confidence will be naturally there. And whatever else you do, whether you are in whatever occupation, profession, whether you're a student, if you are super competent, you're going to be super confident. So confidence, if you want to increase it, you have to become competent, really competent, better than the vast majority of your peers in whatever activity, whatever field, whatever domain, whatever industry, whatever thing it is you are in. That's the simple answer, even though it's really hard to do that. So that's how you increase confidence. Soft-hearted. I don't know what being soft-hearted. Is it bad to be soft-hearted? What does it mean to be soft-hearted? I'm not sure, but be competent. That's what I would say. Not sure about what to say about being soft-hearted. Should you be hard-hearted? I think that's not good. You should be fair. I would say you should be fair. Don't be cruel. Don't be hard-hearted. Don't be soft-hearted. Just be fair. That's it. That's enough. Be competent, be fair. Next question is by Lage Raho Online. A question related to music. A German origin musical artist group called Kraftwerk launched a musical album Man Machine in the middle of 1978. But their music sounded quite insanely different from the contemporary music genres. Their beats sound similar to today's popular electronic dance music. Really, I don't think so. I think it sounds very different, very unique. Even today, if you listen to Kraftwerk and Man Machine, the album, it sounds at the same time retro as well as 40 years in the future. It doesn't sound like today's electronic dance music from my perspective, okay? Even today, it sounds futuristic but retro. It's weird. And their music is so addictive that one cannot stop it without finishing the track. How did they produce such music 50 years in the past? Well, you've always had some people who could produce tremendous there's always been people who think different, who are creative, and who are unlike everybody else. So Kraftwerk is a great example. Let me give you another example. Let us go to Google, and there is a genre of music called acid house. So let's acid tracks by Future. Yeah. So this comes out when in 1987 or 88, and I will not play the music obviously over here because it would give me a copyright strike, but it is very much available on YouTube. I think it's from 1988, and this is the music track, which is insane actually. If you listen to it, it's got that what I forget the instrument that's used, the 303, right? No, not this. Okay, it's got a very unique sound, the kind of sound that was never heard before. And it is considered to be, this track was considered to be the originator of the acid house genre. and it came out in 1987 or 88. But then they discovered an album from 1980, 10 Ragas to a Disco Beat by Charanjit Singh from 1980, a Bollywood musician. Okay, and if you listen to it, that is actually the first acid house album. So there have been musicians like these who are completely obscure, whose music never took off at the time, but today, if you listen to it, you'll be blown away. And it's clearly something that is far ahead of its time. So there have always been people like these, but that music is not for most people. Most people don't won't get it even today. So you got to be a real music connoisseur to be able to get such music and to enjoy such music. So I'm sure Kraftwerk were not a huge success. It's kind of an obscure band today. I'm sure Future and Acid Tracks, most people won't know about it. I'm sure most people don't know about the late Charanjit Singh, who passed away a few years ago. But these people have been the pioneers. Who remembers Nick Drake? Almost no one does. He was the Van Gogh of music. He died at the age of 26. There have been so many such great musicians who came and did something completely unique and then disappeared. And you discover their music decades later. Decades later. Uh, yeah, I can give you more examples, but I won't go and do that because I could spend 2 hours doing that. I could spend 2 hours digging out unknown gems that I am aware of. But I won't be able to play the music first of all because you can't do that. It's against YouTube, rules. So, okay, I'm at the end of the questions I have selected. Let's take some questions from the live chat. Okay, let's take some questions from the live chat. Dheeraj Kamath is giving another suggestion. Minutemen by Beck. Is it Beck or is it Jeff Beck? Jeff Beck was a guitar player. I think he passed away a few years ago recently. He was part of the Yardbirds, and then and one of the members of the Yardbirds was Jimmy Page. And then the Yardbirds broke up, and Jimmy Page created a new band called the New Yardbirds, which eventually became Led Zeppelin. So I'm not sure if Minute Math is by Jeff Beck or some other Beck, but I will certainly check this out. Thank you for the recommendation. I really appreciate that. Okay, Arka Manna asks a question that I kind of took up as the first question of this live stream. What's my view on Rishi Sunak's defeat in the UK and how much it will affect India? I am not surprised that he's been defeated. He did not achieve anything significant, anything stupendous. He was just another guy. And the new guy who's come to power is again going to be just another guy who will do nothing special, significant, or memorable. So it makes no difference to the rest of the world. It makes no difference to India. It doesn't make any difference to the UK much. And for the US, it's business as usual. So nothing. It doesn't surprise me. I kind of expected this. It's a landslide victory for the other guy, Starmer, and it doesn't really affect the rest of the world. It's not going to affect the India-UK relationship at all, in my opinion. Phoenix OP says, when can India build its own flagship jet like the American B-2 stealth bomber? Well, I would like a B-1 first, the Boon. We don't have any strategic bombers, do we? We don't have any. We've never bothered to develop any. The Chinese have knockoffs of Russian bombers. So the B-2 stealth bomber is that flying wing shaped thing. Do you want to take a look at what it looks like? We could do that. Let's go to Google. B-2 bomber. What's it look like? This is what it looks like. All right, the flying wing, and this is the kind of stuff, goodies that it can carry. And this is obviously a knockoff of a Nazi plane. So that thing was called the Horten HO-229 from the Second World War era. Can you imagine how far ahead of the times the German engineers were? They developed this thing decades before anyone even imagined the B-2 stealth bomber. So okay, that's a digression from the question, which I kind of do often. But the point is, when can India do this? So I think we have something that we are developing right now called the Aura or the Ghatak, which is a flying wing prototype, and it's going to be an unmanned vehicle. aircraft. And once it's, and I'm sure we have done a few tests of that, a few demonstrations tests of the concept, a small scaled down version, and eventually we'll have a full scale version of that, hopefully soon. And if that goes fine, we could even put a couple of people in there and make it even larger. So I think we are on the way to doing that. But I'm not sure if it's going to be a strategic bomber. Maybe it's going to be an unmanned vehicle, an unmanned stealth aircraft. But once you have the flying design which actually works, you can scale it up and to convert that, if you can, into a stealth strategic bomber, if you can. So I'm sure we can do it, but you need a government green light for that, and you need funding for that. And will the Indian government fund that thing? I'm not sure, but it can be done. All right. So this is a hypothetical question by Shri Srivatsa. What could have happened if the Mongols, with the leadership of Genghis Khan, had decided on a full-scale invasion of India? What were the major things that might have changed throughout our history? Well, they would have taken out the Turks. Because who was leading, who was ruling India at the time? It was the Turks who were ruling India. So they would have taken out the Turks and they would have imposed Mongol rule in India. And then maybe India's destiny would have been entirely different. You cannot even begin to speculate what would have happened. There would have been no Turkic rule in India. There would have been Mongolian rule in India. And the Mongols were overall not as horrific when it comes to compared to the Turks. I mean, obviously they have a very bad reputation because they took out entire empires in very short amounts of time. The Chinese, they defeated the whole of China. They defeated the entire Khwarezm Empire, which obviously is going to cause casualties. When you conquer that enormous amount of territory, it will cause casualties. That's what the Mongols have a very, very bad name and reputation. But if they had launched an invasion of India, they would not, I imagine, have targeted the civilians. They would have targeted the rulers who are the Turks. So I'm just speculating. This is actually an exercise in speculation. What could have happened? Well, here we are today. We don't know. All right. Okay, Mansi says, what's going on in the SCO meeting? I believe, I've not really kept too much of track of what's happening there. I think Shehbaz Sharif, the Pakistan guy, has gone there, and I'm sure he met Mr. Putin. He would have met Mr. Xi as well. Putin and Xi would have met, and they would have met Central Asian leaders and so on. And Dr. Jaishankar is there, and he has made he has put forth India's perspective on this. Respecting sovereignty, cracking down on terrorism, and so on and so forth. So that's the kind of stuff that's going on there. We have chosen to not give too much importance to the SCO this time, and I think it's the right choice that we have made. The Prime Minister has made. Okay. A lone traveler says questions about food, music, etc. are really interesting. I think it's very interesting. I find these topics very interesting. Culture, music, food, cuisine, traveling. I enjoy that. I agree. Red says, why are the Pashtuns and Balochis classified as Iranians or Iranic? It's because the Western historians have decided that the Balochis and the Pashtuns are Iranic. And that's why everybody believes that, including the Balochis and the Pashtuns. I mean, if you say to a Pashtun that you people are actually subcontinental people who are much closer to India than Iran, then they get offended. They'll say, no, how dare you say that? We know who we are. We have always been different. We have been different for 2,000 years. We are the graveyard of empires. We are different from India. We are more Iranian than Indian. And we are actually descendants of Jews. That's what they will claim. Because that's what they've been brainwashed into believing. And obviously, if you go to Gandhar, Afghanistan today, there is a lot of foreign DNA there, which is non-Pashtun, non-local. There's a lot of Turkic DNA in the population now. Hazaras, Turkmens, Kyrgyz, etc. The Tajiks are still Indo-Iranian. but there's a lot of foreign non-Afghan DNA in Afghanistan today, and that's a consequence of the foreign occupation, Turkic occupation of Afghanistan, which has been going on for the past 1,000 years. So obviously, foreign attitudes, foreign DNA, etc., has permeated into the consciousness. So the Pashtuns now believe that they have nothing to do with India. The language, they believe it's an Iranic language. Listen to Pashto. Does it sound Iranian or does it sound Indian? It kind of sounds somewhere in between. But there is a clear Indian accent in there, okay, in the Pashto language. When it comes to the Balochi language, oh man, come on, they are so much closer to the people of Sindh and Saurashtra than to the people of Persia, the Balochis. They don't even look Persian, by the way, the Balochi people. What are you talking about? But they believe that. So it's because of the Western historians and their influence that everyone believes this. Ubendran says some universities in India, like so and so university, are openly breeding wokeism in India, and students are being brainwashed to become anti-Hindu and anti-Indian. Why is the government being so soft on these issues? Well, you will have to ask the government of India. We need to have very clear policies about these matters. The education system, the purpose of the education system is to create confident young citizens and future leaders who will take the nation forward, not hate the nation. So if the education system is not serving the purpose, then there's a major problem in the education system. And in case certain universities, whether it's X or Y university or Z university, that's doing this more than other universities, then there's a problem there. So I don't know why this is allowed to go on and on and on, but there's a problem. And I've been saying this forever, essentially. The government needs to take education seriously, and we need to have reforms. It's not happening, and it is extremely disappointing. Missed opportunity. Okay. Aryan Knight says, why can India not use Afghanistan as a proxy against Pakistan? Listen, you have to be really powerful to be able to use a nation as a proxy against another, especially when that nation is already being used as a proxy by the US. Okay, geopolitics is extremely complicated. Afghanistan is already a US proxy. The Taliban did not defeat the US and take Afghanistan. The Americans handed Afghanistan to the Taliban on a platter. They left behind $100 billion worth of arms and ammunition for the Taliban. And they are allegedly giving the Taliban a stipend of $50 or $80 million in cash every week. So that is clearly a US proxy, US vassal. You think you can take the American proxy and make it an Indian proxy? You think the Americans will allow that? You think that's how the world works? It doesn't work like that. So from the US perspective, Pakistan is a counterbalance to India? No. In an ideal world for the Americans, India is a counterbalance to China. But India also should not become too strong. So Pakistan is a counterbalance to India. But Pakistan also should behave. So Afghanistan is a counterbalance to Pakistan. That is the game the Americans are playing. All right? That's what's happening. And there's nothing you can do about it unless you are powerful enough. And India is not powerful enough right now. Is India in a position to give more to the Taliban and to keep the Americans away? India is not. Lucario says, did Rishi Sunak lose because of racism? No. No, nothing to do with racism. It was just time for his party to lose. And what did he achieve in his 1 year, 300 days or 200 days in power? Nothing much. So it was just going to happen. Everybody expected this. And everybody who understands anything about the UK's politics expected this to happen. I don't think there's anything to do with anything about racism in this. Okay. Lots of questions being repeated for some reason, but okay, let's see some other questions. Tipu Master says, it looks like Dassault, the French company that makes the Rafale fighter plane, is balking at the tech transfer clause of the new union government. Should India reconsider the F-15EX for MRCA? Should Russia apply its Sukhoi 57 to it? Listen, that these are all complicated matters. And nobody will be willing to give up extremely, extremely sensitive technology without extracting a tremendous amount of value in return for it. So this they know that India desperately needs jet engine technology, world class jet engine technology. So they will obviously negotiate as hard as possible. That's to be understood. It's not like the French are our enemies. They, if we give enough in exchange, they may be willing to transfer the technology, but it will come at a huge price for sure. Now, is that price something we are willing to pay? That's for the government to decide. I think we need the technology somehow anyway. One way or the other, we need that. Whether from the French, from the Americans, from the Russians, whoever. But nobody will give that up just that easily. So I think India needs to find a way to get it. Okay. F-15, I don't think India should get any American fighter planes. I don't think India should even get Russian fighter planes. We need to build our own fighter plane families. We need to build better and better iterative versions of the Tejas fighter plane. We need to build the advanced medium combat aircraft. We need to build whatever other comes in the future. Uh, we need to have spin-offs of these fighter jet families, and we need to anyhow have our own jet engine. Once we have a jet engine, even if it is not super powered, even if it is what 80 kilonewtons or whatever, build a fighter plane with two jet engines and we're fine. So we need to find our own way of doing this. And if possible, just buy the technology at whatever price it comes. That's how I see it. But I don't want India to buy any new fighter planes, any new fighter plane variants from other countries. If you already have the Rafale, then you can buy more because you know how to deal with that. But no new F-15 or whatever else. Sukhoi, unless you have a production line in your country which you control. So that's how I see it. Gaurav says how are both Voyager spacecraft still operational and able to send back valuable scientific data despite being more than 20 billion kilometers away from the Earth? Alert space rock incoming. Look, it takes more than 20 hours for the light signal, for the radio signal to from Earth to reach these spacecraft, and the same amount of time for the spacecraft signals to reach Earth because they are so far away. The speed of light is a limit, right? You cannot go beyond faster than that. But they are still operational with 1970s technology. And today in NASA, there are a bunch of scientists, a bunch of engineers who specialize in the technology just because these spacecraft are still operational. So they've been well designed, well built well. There were some glitches now because of the advanced age of the spacecraft, but they are still somehow communicating, and hopefully they'll continue to communicate for a few more years. Okay, now, any other questions that I could take up? We have crossed the 2 hour mark, so I should end this soon. Summit statement says we had peace when power was in Patliputra. How can we achieve that unity again and ensure that no one feels subjugated, but they're rather united for power, peace, and prosperity? From Nepal. Look, it's impossible for no one to feel subjugated. There will always be people who have grievances. No matter how big your empire is, no matter how small your kingdom is, even if you have a city state with a population of just 100,000, even then you will have people who feel subjugated and unhappy. So it is impossible for everyone to feel that we are all united and blah blah blah. There will always be malcontents and people with grievances, etc. There's nothing you can do about it. The question is, how do we achieve the unity again, all of us, right? That can only happen when the right kind of leader comes about. Is there any leader of the caliber of Chandragupta Maurya today, or Ashok Maurya, or Kanishka, or Kumar Gupta, or Skanda Gupta, or Samudra Gupta, or Lalitaditya Vikramaditya, or Lalitaditya Muktapida, or Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj? Do we have, or Rajendra Chola? Do we have any leaders of that caliber today? We have no such leaders today. That sort of unity can only happen when we have a leader of that caliber. And we have no such leaders today. Compared to the greats, today's leaders are mediocre. It's only a leader with tremendous abilities and tremendous willpower who can unite a nation that is the size of a subcontinent. So hopefully some such leader has emerged, has been born by now, and that's what we can say. So it's because leadership is more important than whatever else. You can never ensure that everybody feels happy. There will always be malcontents, no matter how well you rule an empire, a country, or whatever. So, but yes, it would be great to see all of us united again, and India, the subcontinent, becoming great again, as it has always been. Okay, let's take one more question. Let's take something that hopefully I've not taken before. Uh, no, I only know of one book. So, any other suggestions about a book to learn Sanskrit from, except from Sanskrit Swayam Shikshak? Shikshak. I can only offer that one suggestion. Sanskrit Swayam Shikshak. You study that. That if you study that properly over a period of 3 to 6 months, properly, like really rigorously, then you will be able to have a conversational hold on Sanskrit. And then you can do advanced study of your own just by purchasing the original Sanskrit version of the Ramayana, Mahabharata, the Rig Veda, whatever, and taking it forward. That's what I would suggest you do. And Aryan Knight is listening to future acid tracks along with my video. Awesome. You discovered it. Awesome. Love it. Uh, Phoenix says, do you think the Japanese people think of Japan as a US vassal state or a sovereign nation? Most Japanese people think of Japan as a sovereign nation. If you are a vassal, and if I am a hegemonic power who is ruling over a vassal, I will ensure that that vassal state's education system teaches the people that they are free. That's how you can perpetuate your hold over a nation. So I think most Japanese people are not aware of the fact that they are not a sovereign nation, that they are under permanent US military occupation. What else? What else? What else? Rajat says, how to minimize stress for life? Well, everybody has their own path, own way of doing it. You have to take good care of yourself. You have to eat good food, have a good lifestyle, healthy lifestyle, uh, be physically active, lift weights, sleep 8 hours a day or whatever works for you, and be competent in whatever you're doing. And then to hell with everybody else and what they think. If you place a lot of importance on what other people their opinions are, then you will always have stress. So that's what I would say. And we shall now um okay, Karan says, in spite of having so much solar energy, why are we dependent on coal? Is it practically possible to achieve Kardashev level 1? Following you from first episode, thank you so much. That's amazing, thank you so much. Okay, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate all of you who have been following me, who have been participating. Really appreciate that. Uh, we are still dependent on coal because we are technologically not that great, right? Our governments, they what can I say? The emphasis has never been on technological excellence. Hopefully now it is going to be more like that. I mean, I'm not saying the present government is like that, but historically our governments have cared nothing about the country and its people. That's why we have been so mediocre. So yeah, I think we should certainly have a significant emphasis on solar energy, and India is now the the founding member of the International Solar Alliance, an initiative by Prime Minister Modi, which one has to really appreciate. And we are now making good strides in that direction. But we are still dependent on the legacy technology, which is heavily coal dependent. So it will take time for this to change, but we are hopefully moving in the right direction. Second question: is it practically possible to achieve Kardashev level 1? It is possible for sure, but it may take a lot of time. But it's certainly possible to control the entire energy that's available on one planet. It is certainly possible theoretically. Will humans achieve that? I am not sure. But if we do, it'll be great. I'll be happy. And Om Bekereker says, will ARM replace X86 in the future? I am not sure. Not sure. Mm, maybe, maybe not. I'm not really sure. Uh, Steps for raising standards, knowledge seeker. I think I'll make a video about that because you can't just give steps in a couple of minutes. I think there has to be a separate video, recorded video about that. But I will do that. And with that, I think I'm gonna. Geopolitical Dubey says political turmoil in Nepal again. This time Oli plus Sher Bahadur Deuba. That goes on. That goes on. That goes on. There's always gonna be that sort of thing. Prachit Agarwal says 1 million party. Okay, let's reach 1 million, then we'll do something. Okay. Let's end this session today, the 200th episode of Ask Abhijit. So I'm going to end it over here. Thank you so much to all of you once again. I really appreciate everybody's support. I would not be here doing this without your participation, without your support. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And we will continue this going forward, and we may reach episode numbers that we may not have imagined today. So thank you so much once again. Thank you once again to RAMALAKSHMI and everybody else who has been contributing so much to this community. I really, really appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And I'll see you in the next live stream. Keep raising your standards. Bye.